Since we only got through about a third of the advanced writing panel before we ran out of time, I'm kind of like, I've been obsessed with time since then. Like, making sure that we've got enough time to get to stuff. And I still have no idea if we do. So we're gonna try.
You're good to start.
We can start? All right.
Thumbs up.
Awesome.
Welcome to the Shipping and Romance Writing Panel. Before we get to introductions, I want to say a word about what we will and won't be discussing here. We will be discussing shipping in MLP fandom, which includes some discussion of same-sex shipping. We will be discussing the differences between shipping and writing romance stories, which Sunchaser has been waiting 2 years to explain to everyone. We will be discussing how to write good romance stories and some problems that often come up when writing romance stories. We will not be discussing why our ships are superior to all the others, because it's self-evident. We also won't be discussing how weird shippers are, because that's also self-evident. And we won't be discussing mature-rated writing or shipping subjects. This is a family-friendly event.
We tried that in 2013. It didn't go well.
No, it didn't. And we will have questions at the end if we have time. Like I said, the last panel I was on ran way over, so I can't promise anything. But all right, let's get to introductions. Anyone want to start off with that? Sunchaser, you can start off with that.
Okay. Because I want to start. Yes.
We're going right down
Please
the
don't
line. You won.
Okay, so I'm Sunchaser. I occasionally write pony fanfiction. And my ship is Twilight, because best ship, OTP or Riot. And the main fic that I wrote for that was The Lavender Letter. And that's my major qualification. I also wrote some other things, but they're not quite as family friendly.
I'm Scoots too. And yeah, somebody went woohoo. It's like somebody knows me. And I've written a lot of cheese pie, like a lot of cheese pie. Oh yay! But I've got some ships that are. There's some stuff that I also went to write, like Trender Maud, which would be right down at the bottom. So it's all about interaction. Cheese pie. It's cheese pie.
Hi, I'm Book Player, and my favorite, I can't choose a favorite ship, but it's got to be between Apple Dash or Twijack. And I've written The Apple Dash Project, Best Young Flyer, and A Fact for Twilight.
Oh, I forgot to mention. Sorry, I forgot to mention what I wrote. Yeah, and I've got a whole arc that starts with a story called Swear on Camembert, and it goes on Goodbye Boneless, and The Looking Glass World of Cheese and Pie, which is an Equestria Girls fic. So, anyway.
Okay. I am Aquaman. I am best known, I guess, in this context for Far From the Tree, which placed second in the inaugural Most Dangerous Game contest, which I can imply will continue going because Obsolescence isn't here to say it won't. I have also written Button Ash because I only like to do hard things. And I don't really do the whole shipping thing. I don't really go play for that team. If I had to pick two characters I love shoving together beyond any and all logic, I love just putting Diamond Tiara and Apple Blue in the same room and having them yell at each other.
Hi, my name's Skyrider, and this is going to be a little it's a little dangerous. It's a little out there, but I ship Princess Cadence in Shining Armor.
Oh wow!
Okay, no, I know. All you haters, step to the back.
Scandalous.
Step to the back. No, yeah, I used to write My Little Pony fan fiction. Now I just explain Princess Cadence headcanon and dress it up as stories. But that works pretty well. So I'm probably best known in this context for writing in process extended pre-canon Cadence Shining Armor, sort of explaining sort of where these characters came from and how they got where they are when we see them in the show. A series known as Cadence of Cloudsdale. Series, a number of different stories encompassing. So.
All right. So the first question we're going to start off with today is, why do people ship, and why do people ship ponies?
Well, for one thing, airfare is really expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to pay for all the packing.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, that there's a certain school of thought that you get really involved in the characters, in the characters' lives, and I think it naturally leads authors to want to experiment or explore the concept of situations that the show doesn't touch on all that much in its canon properties. Now, I mean, this could be adventures that go above and beyond what the Y7 rating will allow. And it also can go to a different direction. It can go to other plot points, such as romantic relationships between the characters. It's because we're so involved in the characters, we want to see all the different sorts of stories that involve them, and romance is certainly a viable way that something that we don't see very often, that we kind of want to explore as fan fiction artists as we try to expand beyond the boundaries. So.
I totally agree with that. I also wanted to talk for a minute about a little phenomena called shipping goggles, which is when someone watches the show, and at its most innocent, it's someone watching the show, and in any kind of fiction, there are certain cues that writers will put in that two characters are eventually going to get together. They, give each other looks, or you can tell by the way certain scenes are set up that they must like each other. People with shipping goggles on see those things where the writers probably didn't intend them, and so they start looking, and then as the shipping goggles get stronger, they start looking for those scenes, and anytime the two characters are on screen together, then that means that the writers are clearly showing that they're going to hook up. And that is just at its base, it's just a misreading of common cues of romance, but a lot of times that makes people start thinking along the lines of, well, then maybe I should write some fan fiction where these two characters get together.
This is essentially very intense, passionate, sweaty confirmation bias.
Exactly. Yes.
Of course they're together. They talk to each other.
Right.
Not necessarily even that, I mean, that's I think one of the things, where you have characters. I always point out that after Equestria Games, you can ship any two ponies you want. You can say Cherry Jubilee and that mare with the weird thing on her head, they met at the Equestria Games, so you don't have that problem. If you're one of those ship all the ponies kinds of people, I'm sure there's a few, then that is your lead off. They met at the Equestria Games. So.
And a sub-question for that is, for those of us who do ship, is how do you respond when people say, but isn't the show just for kids? And did you want
Yeah, and that was one of the first things that popped into my head. First of all, I started watching the show as a blessed relief from a culture in which there seems to be an inserted romance plot in everything. And it was just that and Sherlock, and I've been so disappointed in both of those shows, right? I mean, I'm now stuck with the Master and Commander series if I don't want to read romance.
Give it time.
I know. And then I watched Pinky Pride, and I changed my mind on that. But I hear a lot of people saying, but this is a show that's just for kids. Little kids are no romance. And I think, have you seen Barbie? Have you seen, there's romance plots or something like that, and I know Ken is just an accessory, but like Flash, but still, romance doesn't necessarily. I mean, the young rating doesn't necessarily mean there's no plot. So there's no romance plot. So I feel like you could say Pony is the same as anything else.
Right. Practically every Disney movie has a romance plot.
And you can phrase it as the next logical step up from friendship. Not that it's something that would ever come up naturally in the show, but as far as there being a progression from being friends to being interested in hanging out with each other a lot to becoming something that is a relationship, there's a clear dichotomy there. There's a clear order in which things happen. and you can take what happens in the show and what will, I'm sure, continue to happen in the show, and just that first friendship stage, it's very easy to extrapolate from that and make something different out of it.
So next we wanted to talk a little about what makes shipping in the My Little Pony fandom different from other fandoms, because there are some things that are unique to our fandom, like a lot of the most popular ships are shipping a female character with another female character. And also, several of the most popular ships are ones that fans invented using background ponies. Lyra and Bonbon, Lyra and Bonbon.
They're not shipped, they're very good friends.
Right, I hear that. Best friends! And Vinyl and Octavia. Does anyone want to start?
Oh
kick that
yeah.
off?
Oh yeah. I was in Quills and Sofas the other day, and I've written fan fiction. I've been in other fandoms like Harry Potter fandom, and I looked around and I was like, there are so many guys here. I've been in groups of fan fiction writers, and it's almost all female. I'm not used to this, and it's almost all writing male/. And so everything about this feels like opposite world.
Well, okay, I was going to suggest that a lot of the FF ship is just because, at least in the beginning of the series, that's the vast inventory of characters we had to work with. But now I'm going to say this is our petty revenge.
We've been waiting years
You
for
had
this
your
chance.
Harry Draco /fix, and now it's our turn.
But I like the female ships in My Little Pony. I like Slash. As long as it's like universally, cool, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah. You guys down there have been quiet.
Sorry, I'll speak up.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I already you went over why female becomes popular in this view. One of the things that strikes me that's interesting about fandom in general, you don't see a lot of, and that's why I'm glad we have Scoots too on the panel, we don't see a lot of traditional male-female shipping. And this is the last thing I want to say is we should have more because the other ones are inappropriate or anything along those lines. It's just interesting that in a fandom environment, really anywhere, things kind of tend farther away from what you would see in traditional media. And I think it kind of goes back to what you were talking about with being a little bit tired of always having that tacked on romance plot. It's a bit of a response to that. I think you could say that you're trying to create something that is not only a little bit more in depth and a little bit, I guess, out of place, especially in this show, some might argue, but something that's completely different than you would see anywhere in traditional media. Because we're starting to get to that point where that's okay, but that's the thing, we're starting to get there just now within the last few years. So it's got a long ways to go, and for now, I think that's a trend that's pretty consistent among fans making things about shows where they want to see something different.
Yeah, I just echoing the point. We have, the male-female shipping, which, it's not a lot of it. And, a lot of the very developed male characters are basically Shining Armor, who was canonically married the first episode he was introduced in, and Big Mac. So Big Mac has been shipped with basically every female in existence because he's available. But I think that delves into some of the problems, and it segues possibly into the problems we're going to be talking about later, which is to say that you have to, the more the character sort of bent out of shape in order to romantically accommodate them with people that they don't have anything in common with, they don't share any interests, and something, it's kind of not particularly logical ways, and that's sort of, I guess, what we're going to be talking about later in the program. So, but.
Mm-hmm. And, speaking of that kind of stretching of stuff, you do have the Lyra Bonbon and Vinyl Octavia ships where fandom just kind of, picked two characters who had never even spoken and said, these two are a ship.
We had no evidence that they even had seen each other or
Right.
lived in the same city.
Lyra and
or
Bonbon
anything.
were on a bench together. Obviously, they're...
No, they really weren't even.
I mean, with
Viola and Octavia are both musicians in the nation of Equestria. Obviously, they're a couple.
It's
No,
meant to be.
I think that's interesting that.
Well, now
the
they
interesting-
do, yeah, canonically, but that's because of us as
Right.
a fandom.
Yeah.
It's essential
Well, and I think that's a
fandom.
really interesting point to bring up, is
Go
that a lot
fans.
of the canon that came of them kind of descended from those ships. So the ships existed first, and then we invented canon collectively to make them make sense. So that's a really interesting perspective on them existing, because they don't exist outside of those ships. That's why they're always together.
I mean, we named them.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time we see Vinyl Scratch / DJ Pone 3, she's playing she's playing on a record player with sort of an upbeat pop tune for a fashion show. The dubstep thing is just, it all comes from you guys. You know what I mean? It's just we've generated this, and and I think it's really remarkable that and in a way a little scary that the creators have adopted this as the canon personality.
Right.
Let's just hang a banner back there. Mission accomplished.
Oh, I mean, one thing that I wonder about with those ships is that particularly back when the show started, there wasn't any romance in the show practically at all. You had Mr. and Mrs. Cake, and I think that they were the only couple in the show.
And arguably Spike and Rarity.
Right, Spike and Rarity. But I kind of wonder if people didn't choose those as, in a self-fulfilling way, as kind of the canon ships that, because they knew that Apple Dash or Twi Dash were never going to become canon, but you could kind of pretend that, and eventually they are best friends, that Lyra and Bonbon would become canon, or that Vinyl and Octavia were canon. So I kind of wonder if it has to do with the way that, people wanted a couple to root for on a show where there wasn't really a couple to root for. I mean, that's just a theory to toss out there. Do we want to go into Twilight and Rainbow Dash and why those two seem to be the ponies to ship of the main cast?
Well, Twilight is best main six, and Rainbow Dash is, I guess, there.
Rainbow Dash is a very...
I'm not specifically talking about with each other, but it's just those two actually
I would have
appear
trouble thinking of why, and I guess it evolved past that. I would have trouble thinking of a reason why Rainbow Dash didn't initially get there because of a stereotype.
Well, there's that.
So,
But
Twilight's because she's the main character. But.
beyond the stereotype, I mean, I think that we have the brash, outspoken girl is always a very popular character in fiction. I mean, Rainbow Dash is a very attractive something. I mean, those of you who, this traces all the way back to way back when. But I mean, children's television. Everybody loves Red Fraggle. She's the outspoken. Oh, great, Fraggle Rock fans, awesome.
Right.
Great. I thought I was
Fan,
dating
but-
myself. But yeah, no, that's always a very popular character. I mean, all stereotypes aside, as Aquaman mentioned, I mean, I think that's just a natural character for people to want to know about and experience more. And so I think that, once again, that's a very popular thing. And of course, Twilight Sparkle is, in many ways, literally the audience insert, because again, she's the new kid in the block. She's the one that everything gets explained to. So the world is being introduced to her at the same time as being introduced to us. And so I think, in addition, of course, the personalities obviously seem to line up with a lot of fans. So she's the audience insert character. People feel a lot of connection to Twilight Sparkle for various reasons. So.
I've got some other theories. My theory is that Rainbow Dash is almost unshippable. I know you're thinking, oh
No,
God.
I
So they're
In the
up-
sense that she seems so impervious to the softer emotions, and so therefore there's a great desire to see her fall in love and to be
Right.
vulnerable, and it's sort of the way she acts with Tank. And I think the reason Fluttershy doesn't get as much attention is because she's everybody's waifu. They want to keep Fluttershy for themselves, So.
Just keep telling yourself that.
All right. Sun Chaser?
You've got a bit of a grin there.
No, not that. I don't think that's a joke I can make. As long as you don't start asking people to stop making pony art of Fluttershy.
I got that one.
If you didn't get that one, you don't want to get it.
No, you don't. No, you don't. All right. Why don't you, as punishment for that, why don't you tell us how you feel that shipping is related to reading and writing romance fanfic?
I thought that's what you were grinning
Let
about.
me tell you how I really feel. Basically, there is a difference between shipping and romance, much like there's a difference between Harlequin books and good books. Basically, shipping is throwing two ponies in a room and waiting until they start kissing. Romance is having a story that has however many ponies in it, and through various events in the story and aspects of the character, two of them might eventually end up kissing, maybe.
So there's a reason they were thrown into the room.
Yes, there's a reason, as opposed to just get in the room and we'll let you out once you start kissing.
So shipping is like romance, you just skip the boring parts.
Now everybody claps and laughs, but he's not wrong.
Apparently, they've decided to do a slideshow instead of the rest of our panel.
It's like, okay, that's our panel. There will now be a PowerPoint presentation.
Right.
That sounds great, you know.
I suppose you're all
None of us
wondering
know
why
what
we
it
called
is.
you here.
Give people something to look at.
There will now be a constant stream of pictures of ponies doing duck face.
I think that would be the most popular panel at the.
All duck face all the time.
So that's a good segue into what makes a good.
Anyway,
Yes, at least in my experience, one of the big tropes of shipping is precisely that you skip all the boring parts. It's just that your idea of the boring part might be, say, my idea of how do you justify this relationship existing in the first place. I want to know why I should believe in it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. That's good. That's a good thing. That's good
Yeah,
storytelling craft.
absolutely. I mean, I feel similarly. The way I see it, shipping is the general make-believe part of seeing two characters who you would like to be, who you think have chemistry. And that can look like, two characters that you're just shoving together and making kissy faces. And I think everyone has certain pairings of ponies that other people like, that they are like, how on earth could those two ever work together?
It's a bit like a Mad Lib for Sun Chaser. You just fill in a ship and he hates it.
Right. But I also think that that a lot of shippers end up writing romance because the idea for a romance story is hatched because they want to tell stories about the two characters that they think they are in love, or that they think could be in love. On the other hand, I think that romance readers and writers are not always shippers, I think that's kind of what Sun Chaser's getting at, is that you can want to write a romantic fanfic or read a romantic fanfic without necessarily already supporting the pairing, and in that case you are actually probably better at building the story of the pairing. So I think it's really important in writing romantic fanfic to take the shipper hat off, because a shipper can already see how these two belong together, but as a romance writer, you want to explain, you want to be showing other people how these two belong together.
Yeah, I actually, I've written reviews, as some of you know, of fics that have left that part out. And one of the problems with shipping intensely is wanting to skip the work. If, say, especially if popular ships, so just picking two because it doesn't matter to me, Twidash, and assuming right away everyone knows they're meant to be together, and therefore I don't need to, or Vinyl and Octavia, because it's so popular, therefore I don't need to explain anything about them, or, I can just skip to the
Well,
the
you don't
kissy
need to
bits.
explain Twidash. I mean, they talk to each other all the time.
Right, exactly.
Daring do.
But if you want to write a good fic, you have to somehow fill that in, and that's why it's helpful, I think, to take the shipper hat off.
It's
Right.
not
A
as
lot.
obvious to them as it is to you. And I think you have to look at it from the outside and not from your own personal bias.
That's true. The nicest compliment you can give to a romance writer, by the way, is to say, I never would have seen these characters together, but now I really kind of like it. I mean, that's really a
Right.
great feeling.
Or I never understood it before, but now I totally get it.
I got quite a few of those comments on my not Twilastia story. 'Cause before that, when I was first starting out, I set out to write essentially a bad fic. Like, okay, I want to get through this writer's block, so let's take a ship that I'll never actually write seriously. Luna and Celestia.
Oh, we
And then
went
I
there,
sat
okay.
down to write a bad fic that was just going to end up being like drunken comedy, wake up, it never happened, and 3,000 words into the story decides, oh, you thought this was going to be funny, didn't you? No, we're going full in. 9,000 words later, I had somehow managed to make this big emotional catharsis, sisterly support narrative, and everybody comments like, I thought this was going to be so squicky, but I feel so warm, and thank you. It happened.
It was a thing. So, actually, let's go from there into what makes a good romance story.
And everybody looks at me again.
Let's start at the other end this time, Chaser.
What makes a good romance story?
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that what makes a good romance story is, I think that privately I've always felt that the story of romance, is the question of romance between two people, and I say this as a person who's been married for quite a long time, the process of really romance, of romance between two people is actually an active decision on both of their parts to break down the barriers between each other. And it takes a lot of work to do that. And I think that part of a good romance story is just watching two people hesitantly starting on this process to a form of unification, just to watch their defenses sort of to come down very slightly one to another as they start exposing little bits of themselves more to another. And we're not talking about in a filthy fashion here. I'm just mean personality-wise, likes, dislikes, the slipping of the mask that we all have, that you eventually have to reveal yourself to as your real, the person you are inside, not the person you pretend to be. So that's what I like about romance stories.
I've always felt that the characters that have the best chemistry aren't necessarily the ones who like the same things. And they can like the same things, or they can like different things. They can be very different, but the ones that last and work are the ones that have at least one thing where they act exactly the same way, and at least one thing where they act completely differently. So there's the part of them where they both have the exact same thoughts about like what they enjoy doing, or what they fear happening later in life, what they do that might get them into a little bit of trouble at sometimes. But then there's the other thing where they could not be more different, and they're polar opposites in that capacity. But what that ends up doing is they challenge their partner to do something different in their own life. So you make a positive change in the partner that you have, and that's what creates a lasting relationship. And I just started using you instead of they, so this got personal all of a sudden. It's just, you can't have two carbon copy characters, and you can't have two characters who are polar opposites. There's a little bit that they all bond over, and that's the obvious front part of it. And then there's something a little bit deeper where they end up challenging each other to be different and better characters or people or ponies or whatever than they are.
One of the strengths of a really strong relationship is the fact that the two people complement each other, that they're not ideal. They bring different strengths to the table, and that the two of them together make a greater whole than the one alone, rather than just being stronger of the same thing, if that makes any sense.
And I actually run into that a lot because I get a lot of people saying, well, cheese sandwich, he's just a Rule 63 Pinkie Pie. Although, not the way I write him, right? But I mean, the thing is that you can't, in fact, have two characters who are exactly like each other. And, you know, this is not a plug, but you can have characters who seem very similar, but who have one characteristic that is different. In my case, it's an extrovert-introvert thing. My cheese is an introvert. So they are radically different. And also he's very unattached to material things. And so you have a character who's never really going to settle down in one place. So that creates some kind of tension between them as characters, and also provides some kind of dramatic, plot-centered stuff.
Well, I think that if you have two, that's one way you can tell if you're writing characters that are well-rounded or not. Because I think that if you're writing characters as whole characters and not just cardboard cutouts, then you can't have two characters that are exactly the same. You know, you can pick the two characters that are as close as possible to being exactly the same, like Pinky and Cheese, but if you're going into who they are, if they were exactly the same, they would both be living in Sugar Cube Corner, but they're not. Cheese travels around, so there has to be reasons why he travels around. And, you know, if you're actually looking at the whole character, then any two characters are going to have differences. And at the same time, if you're looking at the whole character, then any two characters are going to have some similarities. You know, even the most opposite ships in the fandom, the characters have some things in common. You know, the Vinyl and Octavia being musicians, or a lot of people who really like Rare Jack argue that they both have very similar personalities, even if the ways they express them are totally different. So if you have really understanding both of the characters in the ship and making them feel like real people is one of the most important things in a romance story, I think.
And can I actually mention that the other way that people often go is opposites attract. Opposites automatically attract, so I never have to do the work of explaining why it is that these characters can't stand each other. And so there has to be, I think, when you mention complement, they're not the same, and this really comes to how you write them. They're not the same, but they're also not utterly different, because otherwise it is just locking them in a room and forcing them to stay there until they kiss.
Right.
The opposites attract definitely explains a lot of the early Twidash. It was like, oh, we've got the bookworms, we've got the athletic girl. Obviously they're going to make kissy faces, right? But as for what it takes to make a really good romance, much as Skywriter was saying, it's like you want two characters that are going to support and enhance each other's strengths and weaknesses. And the development as the romance is as they start taking off the mask and they start allowing themselves to be more and more vulnerable, to put more and more of that, I'm going to trust that you'll be there to support me, instead of just letting me fall over in those traditional corporate trust exercises type ways.
One other thing that I wanted to bring up with what makes a good romance is, to me, this is something I've talked about on my blog, and it's something that other people have thanked me for having talked about on my blog, but it's the demonstration. I want someone in a romance story, to show me the chemistry between the two characters, and not just tell me that the two characters are in love. But one of the things that I have found, and it's a weird little detail, in a lot of good romance stories, you have what I call a conversation about stuff, which is just a conversation between the two characters who are supposed to be in love about anything that doesn't have to do with their relationship. It can be about their hobbies, it can be about their plans for tomorrow, it can be about, their friends just gossiping. But in my personal life, I have found that anytime a relationship people start talking about the relationship and, either how in love they are or how they can make it better, then that's not a good sign in the relationship. But in a healthy relationship, you talk about the stuff that you talk about, movies, books, whatever. So that's something that I really like to see in a romance story, is just something that shows me what these two look like as a couple.
And I think we've sort of touched on it a little bit. We could probably move into the problems that come up when you're trying to write a romance story.
Yep.
The first one, the most obvious, is that they're kind of predictable by nature. And it's only because if you put the romance tag on something, you know that sooner or later they're going to end up together. Unless you also add the tragedy tag, in which case they're going to end up together in the middle of the story, and then by the end of the story, they and likely several members of their extended families will be dead. So, other than that, you pretty much know where it's going to go, where it's heading. So the idea is not so much that you have the mystery of will they get together, it's, okay, they're going to get together, how is this going to come about? So it's more, it sounds like a rephrasing of the same point, but it is focusing more on a different portion of it.
There is a bit of a basic formula, though. Particularly in shipping, romance tends to obfuscate it a little bit with extra details, but it is still there, which is basically they meet, they blush, they go out a couple of times, they get together, they have their happy, warm butterflies in the stomach, they have a fight, there's drama, they almost break up, they make up, they get back together, and then they say the I love you at the end.
So now all of you can write a romantic comedy and make a movie. That's it. That was the formula.
That is.
Just don't cast Adam Sandler.
And actually something that got put in as something that we might discuss is that romance sells. I mean, if you go into Barnes & Noble or on Amazon, where they keep recommending things I don't want to read, romance is consistently a strong seller in publishing. Almost always. And so it's not really surprising. I'm not saying that people cynically churn out romance fics so that it winds up in the featured box or something.
I did.
There you go. Okay, so we admit to this, right? But it's because it is consistently popular. People like to read it. So that's part of it. It's a question of making it be good as opposed to making it be not good.
One thing that I noticed a while ago is that it was actually a couple years ago. I hadn't read Pride and Prejudice until recently, and I read it. And one thing that it taught me about writing romance or a trick is to put the characters in an impossible situation for the romance.
Like zombies.
A lot of sure, like zombies. That would work.
That was the original version, right?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies
Cool.
was the original manuscript I found. But no, like if you have your two characters that you want to be in love, and then put them in a situation where there is no way that they could admit to each other that they like each other. If you are trying to ship, Rainbow Dash and Spitfire, then then say there's a rule that Wonderbolts can't date each other. And then you have a really strong plot for a romance because everyone needs to know how they're going to get around this, because it's, a much more dramatic situation than just Rainbow Dash like Spitfire, how is she going to tell her, So that's one trick that I have.
And there's a pitfall that you can fall into there. And there's a phrase that's I'm going to read a quote from a different fanfic author here because he phrases it so much better than any one of us ever could. What he calls it is alien shipping syndrome. It's by Chuck Finley, if you've heard of him. He doesn't write a lot of traditional romance, and I'll leave it at that. But the way he phrases alien shipping syndrome is as follows. It is a malady in romances where chemistry does not occur through shared interests, personal magnetism, or personality traits, but is instead instilled by parasitic brainworms. Symptoms of alien shipping syndrome include sentences like, Rainbow Dash couldn't understand why she was so hot about thinking about Rarity, and Applejack didn't know why she'd never thought this way about Spike before. Physical symptoms include stammering, pondering, long introspective walks to reach obvious conclusions, blinking in confusion, inability to grasp obvious hints, dramatic shifts in canon personality to accommodate a new, naive personality, and frequent blushing. So the general gist of what he's trying to say there is that there's what he calls it is a syndrome, where and you're trying to create that reason why you can go beyond what canon is going to give you and create a reason why people might get together, but you don't really create a reason. You create this magical, alien feeling that they, for some reason, can't identify, and this just sort of shoves them together. So it's kind of portrayed as a plot, but it is essentially throwing them in a room together and doing the shipping thing. It's just sort of masquerading as a romance. So it's something where you're not really giving them a reason for why they're doing it. You're just giving them an action, and you're not explaining why they're undergoing that action.
And then in addition to that, it also, it makes it so that it's not really those characters anymore. It seems like most characters, in stories where you see alien shipping syndrome, become like, they all become the same stammering, blushing, confused character and lose any way that they personally might act in a romantic situation.
Well, the worms are going to need a couple more years to adjust to the world of equestria.
Right.
I think you want the characters to always be recognizably themselves.
Yeah.
That's the goal of what we're doing here. And so I think it comes at it in a backwards way because we're just so intent on getting them together that we lose what's actually special about them. There's a point that when you have a poorly written ship fic where it's basically interchangeable. You could put any two people in there or ponies, whatever. It becomes really dishwater. It's not very good. You know what I mean? We're here to experience the characters. We might as well experience the characters. You know what I mean? So.
And a friend of mine on FIM Fiction says that characters in love should become more like themselves
Right.
and not
Yes.
less like themselves. And that keeps things more interesting, but it also gives the satisfaction of having a really in-character character.
Yeah, like being in love is the willingness to let your guard down to somebody, not suddenly turning into, ooh, shiny, I want to be with them forever and never do anything else again.
One thing that I've noticed that I try to avoid and that I see quite a bit is the list of generic good things where where the character is either explaining to someone else or thinking why they're in love with this other character, and they list every good thing about that character. So if it's Rainbow Dash thinking about why she's in love with Twilight, then she lists every good thing about Twilight, whether Rainbow Dash would care about that or not. Just like it'll get down to and she has really clean hooves, and it's like, and why is this something Rainbow Dash loves? And it could be, but you have to explain why Rainbow Dash feels like this.
That's actually one of the things that I was most excited about talking about in this panel, because it's the reason I'm on this panel was one of the things I directly tried to address in Far From the Tree, which the point of that entire contest was to do something kind of crazy that was that's typically bad or badly done in fan fiction. So I chose the prompt that was shipping a main character with an original character. And original characters are often, they have the alien shipping syndrome thing going on. It's very hard to define them and make them have a personality. And for the plot of the story, obviously you can make the plot about the romance and will they get together, will they won't. But I wanted to make it about, how are those traits not just what's making this happen? So there's a point in the story where the real conflict of the story is not whether they're going to get together, it's they're already together and Applejack walked in on them. So their conflict is him or her talking with him and asking him why he's interested in Apple Bloom, and he starts explaining the list. He goes, well, she's smart, she's funny, we talk well together, and she calls him on it. And she says, no, I don't want to hear that. I already know all of that. Why are you with her? And it was something that I was probably the most proud moment I was in the story was he doesn't have an answer. He says, I don't know why I'm with her. And it's this very honest, open appraisal of there's some kind of chemistry here. I don't understand it. I'm 14 or 15 years old. I just know that I have a crush on this girl, and it's this very pure, head over heels thing. And sometimes that's what romance is. You don't get why it's happening. You don't get why the chemistry is there. She can see it because she's removed from it, and she sees that, he lost his mother when he was very young too. They have similar personality types. There's steps there, and there's reason they're doing it. But it goes back to what was said earlier, the characters themselves don't always know why it's happening, and there can be just a physical component to it, or there can be just this random thing that happened one night that made them realize they're kind of more interested in each other than they thought they were. But it avoids making it about the list and making it about this objective, this, and this is why I'm with this person. It's this very vague, general feeling that you should be with them, and it's difficult for a character to explain, even if you, the reader or the writer, can figure it out like that. So that's what makes a compelling character and a compelling romance is it feels real, because that's what it would be like in real life. You wouldn't be able to accurately explain why you were in a relationship with someone. It would just be happening, and you would know whether it's working or not.
I wanted to say one more thing about Far From the Tree, which is a really good fic, which is that I meant to mention this back when we were talking about romances being predictable, but another interesting thing to do is to have a novel way of showing the romance, not just, character A is walking around Ponyville and is going to go ask out character B, and they go out and ask out character B, but give it something different going on, put it in a different setting, make a subplot of something going on, and and Far From the Tree is a romance between Apple Bloom and this cult that's from the point of view of Applejack, dealing with seeing Apple Bloom in love and talking to her, Apple Bloom's first boyfriend. And I thought that was a really interesting way. There was definitely a question that we didn't know the answer to, which was, what is Applejack going to do about this? But it was, but the romance still came through, and it was really sweet. So I think that that's a good thing to keep in mind and a good example of it.
It's also a really good way to avoid actually doing the prompt. And I got second, so if you want to do well in contests, don't follow the prompts. Just do whatever. Okay, so is that everything we had to cover?
We've got a little more. Yeah. So, let's see here. The next sometimes problem with fanfic that we want to cover is the two sides of the spectrum here. On one hand, you have Fluff, which are romance stories where nothing happens except the two characters sit and cuddle, or if it's Applejack and Rainbow Dash, they sit in the barn and it's raining and they talk. And I've read that fic 20 times. And on the other side, you have melodrama, which is where Applejack and Rainbow Dash are sitting in the barn and talking, and then all of a sudden it bursts into flames, and Rainbow Dash has to save Applejack from the burning barn.
Well, and that is pretty typical if the barn gets destroyed.
It's true.
Kind of
That
a
is
cliche.
true. If it was done as a comedy, then I'd be okay, but it's very serious, and they cry a lot.
They keep trying to kiss and things just keep breaking.
And one thing we wanted to talk about was hurt comfort
Right.
fics, mixed with wing fic in the case of Dash. And there's a story you might have heard of called It's a Beautiful Day in Equestria, where the Twilight Sparkle keeps finding herself in a loop. And the loop is the complete insanity of being the carrying character in a romance fic when she isn't attracted to mares, and she keeps finding, for some reason, every day Dash comes to the library and asks for an enhancing spell for her wings, and it always goes wrong, and Twilight's to blame, and then they kiss, and that this is sort of nightmare. She feels like she's trapped, because she is trapped in a fanfic. And it's really interesting that way. But that particular thing of I'm damaged, this happens sometimes when, a brony in Equestria lands in the Ponyville hospital. It's like, may I take care of you, sort of thing. Fluttershy, again, right? So.
And I think
I was pretty much going to add Broken Wing Rainbow Dash to the thing you see all the time. I mean, I don't know how many Broken Wing Fluttershies there are, because it's it doesn't break her down as much, but I mean it's a lot of Broken Wing Rainbow Dash. So I mean it's just it's a way to it's easy to do, and it's hard to do well at this point, I think, or at least in a novel way.
What if Fluttershy breaks Rainbow Dash's wings?
Yeah, that works. That would be interesting.
If you start with that and ship it,
and
that's an impossible
then they
situation.
kiss afterwards.
Yes,
Right.
There we go.
Wait, did she break them accidentally or on purpose?
Well, you have to read the story to find out.
Right. Yeah.
I already kind of borrowed OCs.
I mean, so with Fluff, what you have is people who, just want to see their characters just want to see the characters that they like to ship hanging out and, and doing nothing. And that can be okay. I mean, with any type of fanfic, as long as you feel like writing it, if you want to sit and write a scene about, about two characters, talking about the weather, then that's fine. There is nothing wrong with that. It's not that interesting to read for a lot of other people, but, sorry, I have 10 minutes left. It's not that interesting to read for a lot of other people, but it's also, it's your fic. The other side of it's a little more interesting, because melodrama is what happens when you have that, but then someone told you that you have to have a problem in the fic.
Like all of their family is dead.
Right. Well,
It's a problem.
you just want to have these two characters sitting around and talking, but someone told you that there has to be a conflict, so you just tack on the first conflict that you come up with. There's a fire. And yes, that's a conflict, but when people say that a story needs a conflict, what they really mean is that there needs to be something connected to the characters that makes the characters grow or change. And if your conflict doesn't have anything to do with the two characters and it doesn't, help the characters grow in any way, it doesn't reveal something new about the characters, then it's not really adding anything to the story. You really might as well have been writing about them sitting around and, making kissy faces at each other. And, once again, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to have a conflict, you want it to be part of the theme of the story, that, you're trying to, if you're trying to tell a story about, Rainbow Dash being afraid to ask out Fluttershy, then a conflict where she has to save Fluttershy from a burning house is probably not going to be as relevant as one where, Fluttershy, where she has to, go into the Everfree Forest at night in order to, something where her fear comes up and it reflects back into her problem with asking out Fluttershy. So that's just one way to address the melodrama issue.
You also don't want to get into manufactured drama, which is something that shipping fics will do all the time and kind of annoys me just a little bit. To take the fire example, like say you want to have Applejack and Rainbow Dash, and they're sitting around and they're blushy and they're talking, and then maybe Rainbow Dash just turns and says, "You want to make out?" And you can have that, but then somebody tells you need a conflict. So Rainbow Dash turns to ask if you want to make out and sees the barn is burning down. And so they rush over to save the barn, but they're not soon enough, and now they have to replace the barn, and Rainbow Dash offers to help. And then it's like, all right, that's not bad. Now we've got a conflict, but then that's resolved because, it's Ponyville, they raise barns in a day.
Right.
And then you still need more conflict. So it's like, oh, well, okay, the barn burns down again. But we've been there already, and it doesn't have the impact anymore. So this time, when the barn burns down, Apple Bloom dies in the fire. And now Rainbow Dash has to be there for grieving Applejack. And it's okay, and you start to get over it, and then the collapsing timbers of the burned down barn fall and crush Winona. Wow. And then Rainbow Dash is there to nurse Applejack through this terrible grief, and then Granny Smith succumbs to the losses of the family. And then Rainbow Dash is finally like, I can't do this. So Rainbow Dash flies away, overwhelmed by this massive tragedy, and Applejack has to bear it alone until they finally come back together in the sunset in the final act, and they make up and they make their kissy faces, and then they go off. And everybody's dead, but they're together at the end. So it's
And it
No, he
doesn't-
died
No.
earlier. You missed it.
you must be new. Big Mac is male. He's not in the story.
Right. And it doesn't help that stories like this sell like hotcakes. And I mean, sell millions and millions of copies to authors I will not mention. But, sort of pointless and then easily resolved conflict, having cardboard characters that are shipped together for no reason. Just because those authors make millions of dollars doesn't mean you should do it too. Just
Unless
be
you
a
want to make
poor
millions of dollars, in
fanfic
which
writer
case.
doing it.
I mean, who wants that? Seriously.
We don't talk about that.
We do not discuss this, no.
We can't.
We can't. So,
All right, how much time do we have
we have
left?
5 minutes
5
left.
minutes.
All right, do we want to do questions?
Questions, maybe?
If anybody has anything burning,
Try to do 5 minutes of questions.
and do we have an extra mic is the other question.
We do, yeah.
Cool.
Gotta-
That'd be great.
Hey,
We have initiative from the audience.
that's right. Apparently people really want to do questions.
You
No.
can just pull it out, and there should be a switch on it.
Or we'll just spend 5 minutes doing audiovisual stuff.
Just yell.
That sounds
We still have that slideshow of duck faces, right?
Hello?
I stayed up all night making
Hello?
that. We better use it.
We will. Oh,
I
Yeah.
don't think I have Wi-Fi.
We will have questions, say here-ish.
I don't.
All right.
Just hold
We'll
on.
probably get through 3.
Yeah.
Way
And this
more
is
than
a
5 minutes.
Yeah, a bit of a
questions
speed round. So
Yeah.
quick as we can.
yep.
All right, the question I've been wanting to ask this whole time, you guys have been bringing up pony and pony ships. How do you feel about human and equestrian romance stories?
I don't get why they're so special because there are 14 different races in Equestria that are sentient and not ponies. So I feel like a human would get there and they go, oh, hey, you're new, and then they wouldn't care.
What do you
That's
mean?
my thing.
What do you mean human and Equestria stories? There is one human and Equestria story, and it's been written 1,000,000 times.
There's that. I mean, I think it's kind of the same as, when it comes down to it, it's the same as any original character. And the hard part about original characters is making them enough of their own character and showing why the other character likes them. And in this case, you have to make a human in Equestria or an original character pony that is enough of his own character that you can show why a character like Rainbow Dash or a character like Twilight Sparkle is in love with them, and you don't end up with alien shipping syndrome.
Deal. Thank you very much.
Hi, I want to ask, I know crack shipping is a thing where people just ship. What's the most ridiculous crack ship you guys have seen?
I think Bats wrote.
I technically wrote you could see it as a shipping story between Twilight Sparkle and a bowl of peaches.
There's Rainbow Dash in the kitchen sink.
That's
I wrote Button Bell once. It was bad.
I don't think that.
Shouldn't have done it.
I don't think that
Bats
counts.
wrote Discord and Scootaloo once, and I think that was on a dare.
I did Twilight Sparkle X her bedside table once, and that's fairly infamous.
How does that even work?
It didn't really. It was just all an elaborate setup for a terrible pun. So
What was
We'll say the
fun?
pun.
you have to read the story.
Right. All right, next one.
Spoil it.
It's worth it. Go read it.
So basically, the high point is natural progression.
Yep.
Is
Yep.
the best part of it. Also, are you guys gonna like cross post or like blog each other so I can find you all?
Yeah, we'll blog each other all night long.
This is the shipping panel. No, I was going to do a wrap up of the panels I've been on, and I will definitely link everyone from my
And-
blog at
That'd be
least.
great. Yeah.
I can't speak for everyone, but I know at least I'll be in Quills and Sofas for a little bit afterwards. I'll
Yeah.
be heading out at some point fairly soon, but for maybe half hour at least.
Yeah.
I'll
Okay,
be
We'll
available.
also be there tomorrow.
Well, thank you
Yep.
for the panel. Appreciate it.
Hi. The one shipping, the parent I've always liked to be strong about is when spike in rarity, even though it does cause problems with some people, but it's something I feel passionate about. One, because he was raised by ponies, so it doesn't think it's shocking, you'd find it attracting. But I know it's problematic with people, so I was wondering, do you feel you should try to do a story that has something that causes controversy, or should you try and play it safe and just do something you know people will like?
Here's the thing
Screw
about
what people like.
Yeah.
Do what you want to do.
Well,
I
here's
write
the
what
thing
I
about
like, yeah.
controversy. You can write anything controversial you want. It's like writing a story idea that's very uncommon. You can absolutely do it. It's just going to be harder to pull off. So that's the problem that so many people have, and it's why it gets a bad reputation. Like, there are all these different like immediate ships and weird ones that have been written not as well as they need to be to work, and that's why they get a bad reputation. It's not that they're impossible. It's just the old adage: there's no such thing as a bad idea, just bad writers.
Right. All right.
Which is true.
One more question.
Okay.
First of all, nice to meet you. Well, nice to see you outside of the writers group, Scoots.
Thank you.
Also, general question. Like I said, there was a question about OC writing and
Yep.
romance. Well, I was going to ask about how to flesh it out, but you pretty much summed it up perfectly. So instead, I guess what I wanted to ask was, do you feel that... Oh, now I remember. Sorry. I think you guys forgot to mention one kind of conflict that's very frustrating and common. And that is, in my opinion, the misunderstanding argument.
Well, actually, I had a comment on a story about that just the other day, and what I pointed out is that the misunderstanding argument is really annoying if that is the only conflict that the characters are having. But if the misunderstanding argument, which, for anyone who's not clear on it, is where, character A says, I'll meet you at the big tree at 8 o'clock, and character B shows up at 6 and thinks that character A stood them up, and now they're fighting when all they had to do was say, I'm sorry. But if the misunderstanding is because of who the characters are, that they never would have thought that the other character meant this, then that's a totally different thing, because in that case, it's actually the characters' personalities that are the conflict, and the misunderstanding is just a symbol for it. But if it's just something that the characters totally should have understood and didn't, then it's just...
I mean, it's
If
the
it
same kind
only
of thing
becomes a
that
problem
causes
because of idiot ball, then it's manufactured drama.
Right.
Pretty much, yeah.
So you can't imagine a character thinking that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all for
Thank you
coming.
guys for coming.
You're all wonderful. Thank you for attending and listening to us talk.
And again, Quills and Sofas, if you had any more questions or just
Yeah.
wanted to throw money at us,
Absolutely.
Go forth and
I don't know if
ship
anyone
all
you
the
would,
ponies.
but go for it.
though, if you would.
All right.